These are my top 5 movies that have the most truth about contact with aliens that I know of. First up is Arrival. These are in no particular order. This is a great movie with psychological aspects to it, time travel aspects. I don't want to ruin the whole thing. The next one is Annihilation. I actually had a person from the government call and tell me that I should watch this movie because of how much weird truth it has and warnings. The next one is a horror. This one's called The Sphere. If you haven't seen this movie yet, it's absolutely terrifying. It's a mind bender, and it's totally worth a watch. Is The Sphere. Also notable on this list, you've got to talk about The Abyss. This was one of my favorite movies of all time back in the day. If you haven't seen The Abyss, it's under the ocean. It's got all kinds of psychological stuff and alien contact. This is a badass movie. You've got to give The Abyss a watch. This one has such psychedelic stuff. This was a really amazing movie. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You got to put this on the list. If you watch it from the beginning, there's a lot of paranormal stuff in there and a lot of truth, and even real scientist J. Allen Hynek is in this movie. It's a really good one about alien contact. And we'll throw in an extra one, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Everybody knows this movie, but if you haven't seen it, way ahead of its time when it comes to artificial intelligence, contact with aliens, and the ending is such a plot twister, trying to figure out what's going on. I think it has a lot of interesting stuff in there. You got to give these movies a watch.
Out of all those movies, to me, the best one was The Abyss. That's a must watch.
Right behind me here is Clay Hill, and it's one of the biggest UFO hotspots in the entire UK. And I grew up around here, and me and my family and our neighbours as well, and people that live around here have had some very profound experiences, most notably which started around the 1960s, is when it all really began and solidified this place on the map. Now in the 1960s, people had unexplained bangs and booms, scraping noises, some people reported figures running around the town down there itself, and a whole host of other stuff happening after that. And then during that time period to around 1967 as well, there was a UFO flap, so strange orbs, saucer shapes, cigar shapes, over Clay Hill, Bell Hill and the surrounding area, even over the town. And for many, many years, even to current day, people are still witnessing stuff happening at this site, whether that be extraterrestrial in nature or even paranormal. There's a lot of unexplained phenomena that still goes down here. Now, me and my family, many years ago, from around 2014 onwards, unexplained teleporting light, triangular craft, V-shaped craft, cigar-shaped objects, weird noises, figures and stuff as well. And this is what really got me into this subject and trying to find more answers to what is really taking place here. And this is part of a ley line epicenter towards Stonehenge area. The entire surrounding area of Wiltshire for centuries has just had so much unexplained strange activity taking place, so it's quite surreal to be standing here again and being amongst it. So gives me goosebumps, man.
The Anunnaki and Nibiru are such a fascinating theory. So it goes like this: 13.8 billion years ago, there was a Big Bang. After a few billion years, the Earth was formed. But so was the 9th planet named Nibiru, or Planet X. And supposedly there was a civilization formed on there named the Anunnaki. Over time, the Anunnaki came to Earth and mated with some early Homo. They biologically changed the offspring's DNA to contain 2 strands instead of 8, which the Anunnaki have. And it's supposedly said that they also built the pyramids with their high tech and possibly were higher dimensional beings. Like the coordinates for the Great Pyramid of Giza matches exactly the speed of light. And towards the end of the Cold War, the US had enough atomic weapons to destroy the world 16 times over. And oddly enough, during this time, there was an absurd amount of UFO sightings. But at the end of the day, it's just a theory. Let me know what you think. Stay weird.
Pennsylvania went on strike, and what followed was an orchestrated crackdown that framed their struggle as criminal, so the elite could crush dissent and profit from extraction. In the early 1870s, the coal region of Pennsylvania was dominated by immigrants, especially Irish, but also Welsh, German, and others. They were working under brutal conditions for owners tied to the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad and other coal-bearing interests. Workers' wages were cut by 10 to 20% in 1874, as coal operators sought to maintain profits in a downturn. Miners responded by initiating a widespread strike known as the Long Strike. At the same time, the company and rail interest were constructing a narrative that labor unrest was tied to a secret society of Irish miners led by the Molly Maguires, which they accused of sabotage and terror. using this framing to justify a crackdown. The coal and railroad interests, under leaders like Franklin B. Gowan, president of the Reading Railroad, used hired detectives such as Pinkerton, as well as state-sanctioned police forces to infiltrate mining communities, collect testimony, and prosecute alleged members of the Molly Maguires. Between 1876 and 1878, more than a dozen Irish-American miners were convicted and executed, most famously in 1877, following a trial widely viewed later by scholars as deeply biased, relying on covert evidence, paid informers, and orchestrated police action. Basically, they were framed. While some violence did occur in the mines and by minor groups, the suppression of the Molly Maguires served to discredit labor organizing, weaken unions, and cement employer control. In effect, the law was weaponized against working class solidarity. The events of the long strike and the Molly Maguire's trials reveal a pattern: immigrant workers organizing to resist exploitation, then being framed as criminals, crushed by force, backed by corporate power and state power. This pattern presaged many later labor struggles in the U.S. The coal barons didn't simply repel a strike, they reshaped the narrative. Labor, crime. Immigrants, trouble. Industry extraction, virtue.
If you're enjoying this video, I put several videos out a week. It'll be amazing if you hit the subscribe button and join me in the next video.
I just got to my apartment. I don't know who left this out here. What is that?
Someone please tell me what the fuck that is. Someone please tell me what the fuck is that. Oh my god. That better be fake.
It kind of reminds me of the chupacabra.
So people that have never broken a bone, they're supposed to endure emotional pain more than physical pain.
Whoa!
In life.
Whoa!
Yeah, and so the reason for that is like, the universe knows that you're already going through so much emotional pain. That's why they're protecting you from all the physical pain. I knew that was gonna get to you, because I do the same, fam. I've never broken a bone. I go through mentally all the time.
Damn.
Yeah. Yes,
Damn,
fam.
that makes a lot of sense.
I knew you were gonna get. I knew that was gonna hit though. I knew. Yo, when I read this, I would go into my notes. I'm like, yeah, that's gonna get him, and that was the perfect reaction.
Fuck.
If you don't know him, yeah,
That's crazy.
Yeah,
That's actually crazy.
yeah, fam.
You know what I heard too?
Yeah.
You're a firstborn, right?
Yeah, firstborn.
There's a theory on the firstborn.
Of what?
And it's actually in the Bible.
Oh,
Yeah. So every firstborn, they have one duty. And they have one purpose they have to fulfill.
What was he about to say about the firstborn? I gotta look that up now.
So this guy bought this LG washing machine that was smart and Wi-Fi enabled. And one day he was looking at his internet consumption and realized that the washing machine was using 3.5 gigabyte of data a day. He went on to find out, he was shocked. He was highly suspicious. What kind of information is this washing machine sharing? Well, apparently washing machines are collecting a significant amount of data, including personal information, date of birth, location, access to photos. Now, this is what many people are wondering. The Internet of Things, right? Everything being wireless, everything being smart, collecting data, and it goes down a rabbit hole, similar to a lot of theories that's already out there. And that's why I really don't have any smart things in my home, other than this phone, and I think that's about it. I don't have any newly enabled Wi-Fi fridge, washer, dryer, fridge, or any of that stuff. You want to keep your home as organic and Amish as possible.
Now that has to make you think, right? What other smart devices in your home are collecting data and personal information from you? If a washing machine could do it, then maybe a refrigerator, a microwave, etc. Just think about that one.
In late 1991, an Anglican priest and UFO researcher named Ray Boche traveled to Lincoln, Nebraska for a meeting that he was told never happened. He was meeting with two scientists who worked for the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, or DIA. These were men with the highest security clearances imaginable. These are men who spent their days analyzing classified data from satellite intercepts and military sensors. But when they sat down across from Ray, they weren't acting like hardened intelligence officers. They were shaking. They were terrified. They handed Ray a stack of documents and told him a story that seemed impossible. They explained to him that inside the Pentagon, a secret program had been established to communicate with what the government called non-human entities, or NHEs. The scientists explained that the government had successfully established contact and were receiving messages. They were receiving technical diagrams. Now, on the surface, it just looked like a diplomatic exchange with an advanced extraterrestrial civilization. However, scientists told Ray that there was a problem. They said that these entities were liars. The entities would show the government analysts images of the future, terrible cataclysms, wars, environmental collapse, and then promised that they had the technology to save humanity. They presented themselves as these benevolent space brothers here to guide us into a new age. But the two scientists had noticed a disturbing pattern. The more they interacted with these things, the more their own personal lives began to fall apart. They described poltergeist activity following them home from the lab. They spoke of shadows standing at the foot of their beds, or their families falling ill, of a dark, oppressive atmosphere that had nothing to do with science and everything to do with spiritual warfare. They told Ray Bochi that they had come to a horrifying conclusion. The US government weren't talking to aliens. They were talking to fallen angels, and the government was unknowingly entering into a Faustian bargain, trading human access for forbidden technology. Now, this meeting in '91 was the first crack in the dam, revealing a silent civil war that has been raging inside the American intelligence community for decades. While the public was being fed movies about E.T. and Close Encounters, a faction known as the Collins Elite was desperately trying to shut down these programs. They weren't trying to hide the truth from the public, they were just trying to save the souls of the people involved. But the Collins Elite failed. The lure of the technology was too strong. You see, the reason the government couldn't stop engaging with these entities is because of what we call the arms race. History shows us that while the US was recovering craft, so were the Russians and the Chinese. Now, the logic in the Pentagon was that if these entities are demons, so be it. We cannot let our enemies harness their power before we do. And in fact, not to side rail off too much, but this is the exact same mentality with creating a super intelligent AI. We can see that in the highest echelons in the government. Nothing changes. It's the same mentality, the greed for ultimate power before anybody else gets it. Well,
right, at what point are we allowed to start saying this out loud? Because another celebrity's child has been found on New Year's at that, and that don't seem right. So Tommy Lee Jones' daughter, Victoria, was found in San Francisco hotel. Let that sink in. A hotel, a major city, a high-profile family, and now a sudden. So they're saying that 34-year-old Victoria Jones was found early New Year's Day, around 2:52 and 3:14 a.m. Listen to this. Someone in the hotel found her laying on the ground on the 14th floor. They told guest services called police. And when police came there saying they suspected it was a drug, they're not officially saying the cause of, but what they're saying is the cause of being color change, a code 3 color change. But here's where the story starts looking less simple and more like something people aren't supposed to be talking about loudly. A celebrity's child found in the middle of a luxury hotel in a major city, with the explanation being no foul play suspected, before the medical examiners even released the detail. And that'll make you wonder, was it really or did something happen between the time she left a party or when she ended up in that luxury hotel's hallway? Who was she with? She couldn't have been by herself. Now, how does all of this look to you? Because with this type of situation, people start questioning narrative. Either way, it's a sad story.
Now, was this coincidence, an accident, or was this done on purpose?
Who even decided that it's 2026 right now? Literally, a monk guesstimated Jesus' birthday, and then the Pope low-key time traveled so Easter could fall on a Sunday. But in the BC ancient era, there was no single global calendar. All of these ancient civilizations were doing their own thing. Many times they would reset depending on a new king or a new era or a new dynasty, but they were usually based on the sun or the moon or local religions. Now, what happens is the Egyptians are sun-dialed in with their 365 solar calendars. So our boy Julius Caesar basically steals his girlfriend Cleopatra's calendar and calls it the Julian calendar, which is why we have Roman emperors and gods in the names of months. But 78 years later, Jesus Jesus Christ is crucified by the Roman Empire. But then 279 years later, Emperor Constantine is like, wait, Jesus is actually really cool, and converts to Christianity, and Rome becomes Christian. But then 164 years later, the Western Roman Empire falls. But this is important. The Roman Catholic Church and the calendar stayed. So in the medieval era, most of Europe and the Catholic Church is still using the old Julian calendar. So by 529 AD, there's this guy named Dionysius. People think that AD stands for that was his idea. That is Latin for year and of our Lord. So technically, it's 2026, the year of our Lord, 2026. Now, this system resets the calendar to the life of Christ, not some pagan Roman emperor who persecuted Christians. So by 1582, 1,000 years later, Pope Gregory XIII is like, actually, those Roman boys were being a little bit too fast, too furious with the math, because we're starting to see a drift, 11 minutes a year to be exact. We can equinox with you, because now Easter isn't lining up. So they basically fixed all the leap years and then just skipped everyone ahead 10 days. You do that? Yeah, it's fine. Jesus said it was okay. So what happens is he calls the Catholic countries, and they're like, bet that. But the Protestant Reformation had just popped off, so some of them are Protestant from the old calendar, but eventually it does spread to even non-Catholic Christians. So that is why even some Orthodox Christians have Christmas in January, because they're still using the Julian calendar for their religious holidays. Now, most wealthy Western European nations began the age of exploration, or imperialism, depending on who you ask. Now, what happens is they take their language, religion, and calendars to the Americas, Asia, Africa, etc. Now, the local calendars, of course, still exist there, but all aspects of civic life, like government, taxes, trade, missionary, navigation, especially in the globalized standards in 1900 to today, like industrialization, the railroad, time zones. Time is money, so we have to be on one time. I'm going to tell you one time. Now, what happens is the non-Christian nations even start to adopt the calendar for civic use, like Japan, China, Turkey, even Saudi Arabia in 2023. Now, many nations and people use their traditional calendars alongside the Gregorian calendar. So the Gregorian calendar for everyday life or business, but the traditional calendar for religious and cultural reasons. So the Mayan calendar, the Islamic Buddhist calendar, the Hebrew calendar, the Hindu calendar, the Persian calendar. That's why your Persian friends are saying Ishmael Mubarak in March and not on January 1st, okay? Also see the secularization of the language. So BC, before Christ, in academic settings or business settings, now BCE, before Common Era. And AD, the Anno Domini right here, is now CE, Common Era, but they do delineate the same time period. So TLDR, it's 2026, bestie. Happy New Year.
More evidence that the true Holy Land is in the North Pole, no matter how crazy it sounds. To me, it's so blatantly obvious in the Bible. Like, God is the king of the North. And there's just so many verses. I've done a whole bunch of videos on them. So Paul argues with the Ephesians about them worshiping Artemis/Diana, right? So that's the moon goddess. She like stands on the moon. So I have this Greek mythology book, and I never noticed this somehow. Artemis is always with a reindeer, like always. And as I'm looking through my books on ancient Greece and ancient Rome, there's reindeer in so many of these pictures. There's not and has never been any reindeer in Greece. There is reindeer in polar regions. And as I was looking through all of this stuff today, all of these verses started popping into my head, like how Jesus says, the time is coming when you will neither worship God on this mountain. It's just adding up way too much. I'm starting to wonder if Pangea is like a slightly twisted version of like actual truth. The four corners of the earth, like the Microsoft logo, is like the land, and like Jerusalem was like the North Pole. That's why they would say we're going up to Jerusalem. What if like those are like the continents that shifted? Antique books that talk about Hyperborea, which is like the North Pole, always say that it's like a warm climate. Like it's not what it appears to be to us. Also, the Sami people, which are the indigenous tribes in the polar regions, believed that reindeer came directly from the Northern Lights. So think about all the verses where the Bible says things along the lines of like, doe of the dawn. And not to mention that sheep and goats, like the actual type of sheep that are in the Bible, are polar region animals. And the Star of Bethlehem is Polaris, which is in the north. God is fire on a mountaintop, and like you go to the north, and the Northern Lights always cluster around mountaintops.
The Bible describes a mountainous region, which is not what they say it is today, but it does exist in the north, and shepherds would guide the sheep with rods/staffs, literally poles. Pole, the North Pole. Sailors have always used the North Star as a guidance. It always brings them back to safety. The Star of Bethlehem appeared over the manger when Jesus was born. The wise men followed the North Star to safety, and the North Star sits on top of the North Pole.
I can't believe that people don't believe me when I say this. Like, it just seems so obvious in scripture, and I'm not the only one that picked it up. There's a lot of antique books that talk about and prove the exact same thing. I don't understand how nobody sees it. Like, God is literally the king of the north in the Bible, and it says that his throne is in the north. Satan wants to ascend in the north above God's throne. Why don't people see this? I don't get it.
What the hell just happened? Nothing. They rage baited with pretty much every main character to die, but not a single person did, apart from Carly, who was made out to be the villain, and then, you know, no one really gave Now, playing devil's advocate, I did like the ending. If they fix the other stuff, that was a nice throwback, especially if you've been watching for the full 10 years like I have. But what in the world were those plot holes? Seriously. I thought there was going to be some great reveal, like we were being tricked by Vecna, like look, the fake color there. And then we had the dial, which was gray in episode 1, then became red. Will talking about getting milkshakes in Melvards, which they don't sell milkshakes, but Melvards did in Vecna's days. But no, none of it was revealed. Also, the fact that you pretty much have to see the first shadow play in order to understand a lot of what's going on. Like, they didn't actually explain much. And this gets on my nerves so bad, because why did they not explain who opened the door originally? The Duffers literally said in an interview, it wasn't Demogorgon and it wasn't Vecna that opened it, but it will be revealed, but it wasn't. In the final battle, man, I mean, yeah, El was aura farming for about 20 seconds and then Lucas threw a water. I mean, where are the Demobats and the Demogorgons? Surely they can come to the Abyss, like they come to Hawkins. Now, as I say, man, I'm not nitpicking. It was emotional at times. I thought the actual physical ending of it was done very well, but there's so many plot holes and it just leaves me completely empty because I'm like, what the hell happened? And then anybody. The whole thing.
There's a civilization up on Mars, two factions that have been fighting for hundreds of years, and that fight is still going on. That's why we're not allowed to land anything there, and if we try to send up anything there, they shoot it down. There's a civilization up on Venus. Venus is a really nice place to live, and they look like just, you know, us. Uranus has civilizations, and the people are in huge round containers that contain housing, and they orbit Uranus. The one that orbited between Jupiter and Mars was a planet called Man. I think there was 100 billion people there. They had tremendous innovations. Their buildings were, you know, made of gold and silver and highways of diamonds. It was really something. That plan did not fit into the agenda that the Serpents had. And the Serpents, I've told you, are the head of everything that goes on in this universe. And for some reason, Planet Man, they blew it up. It took them 1.5 seconds. Nothing was left except the asteroid belt. All the gold and stuff we find on the surface of the Earth, those come from the Planet Man disintegrating.